So, what is so fascinating, to me at least, about the government witnesses in the Elizabeth Holmes trial? I'm going to tell you. What I find so fascinating is they are not defendants in this case. They aren't people who were indicted, pled guilty, and who's looking to get a shorter prison sentence by way of cooperation. What do we so frequently see sensationalized on television with cooperating witnesses? As I start this video, and there's some helicopter going above me, but the home is shaking. Just work with me. We're going to power through it. So what is so fascinating is these are people who want to do the right thing, who are testifying because they want to ferret out fraud and create justice for people who have been victimized. And it is a big hit to the defense, who will not be able to argue you are only cooperating because you want to avoid prison. That's typically true. You are exaggerating, using hyperbole. You're doing everything you can to try to convict my client to avoid your own wrongdoing. It's like, yeah, I don't want to go to prison. It's part of the reason I'm cooperating. I'm hoping to get a coveted 5K1 letter that'll keep my tush out of jail. We don't have that here. So in part 5 of the Elizabeth Holmes trial, or at least we're going to cover part 5, I'm going to break down some of my thoughts from our experience as a court reporter in my own world, because I actually haven't been invited by the court to work as a court reporter, but I am going to do it on our YouTube channel. And if you're listening to our Prison Professors podcast, thank you for listening. And of course, if you're here on YouTube, please like and subscribe, only if you find value in the video. To help with this video, I'm going to go to a blog our team wrote at Prison Professors, and I'm going to use some really fancy, impressive technology, otherwise known as screen share, to help make my point as we cover these government witnesses. So in this case, Danise Yam was called to trial and questioned by the defense. Danise Yam's role was to talk about the finances from 2006 to 2017 and the accumulated losses from 2003 to 2015, as I understand it, $585 million. And that's a lot of losses. The government alleges a lot of fraud, a lot of deceit. That's why she's been indicted. I say she, Ms. Holmes, been indicted on 10 counts of wire fraud and 2 counts of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. Of course, had she taken a plea agreement, I'm guessing, I'm not clairvoyant or psychic, but I'm guessing she probably would have pled guilty to a count of conspiracy to commit wire fraud with a cap of 60 months, maybe a cap of 120 months. But had she gone about things differently, she'd been out of there in 2 or 3 years, and she turned down an opportunity potentially to cooperate against Balwani, her former lover and employer of this company. And of course, had she cooperated against him at his trial, because he's going to trial in a few months, she really would have positioned herself for a better outcome, including keeping herself out of jail or prison. So she must be firmly convinced that she's innocent. And of course, as her lawyers are arguing, losing money or failing business is not fraud. It's just bad business. And some businesses fail, especially aggressive biotech startups. Yam was the financial controller for this company for a long time. And on the stand, she argued it was interesting that Theranos went years without having their books audited, which she thought was funny for a private company. Though in retrospect, it's probably not that funny, because of the losses, the money raised, the money lost, the expenses without anything coming in would not have been that attractive, to suitors and in some day going public. So for that reason, it might have been in their interest to not have the books audited. They probably said, we can't afford it. Let's apply the money elsewhere, because some weeks they had millions go out without actually anything coming in. Something that's interesting, and you're going to hear a lot about in the Balwani trial, I suspect, while I'm not a trial lawyer, our team has been doing this long enough to know. Balwani personally backed some of these loans. So you're going to hear his lawyer say, if Balwani thought this was a crime, if he thought this was a ruse, why would he personally back it? I've heard that a lot over the last 13 years from people who have unfortunately gotten into trouble and served time on the wrong side of prison boundaries say, if I thought this was a fraud, or if there was wrongdoing, why would I have put money into this or back it? Well, there's myriad reasons why, including backing it could then help them raise more money by showing potential investors, I'm such a believer in this, I'm so confident in our success and our ability to deliver as promised, that I'm willing to back it. So if I'm willing to back it with everything that I have, why are you not comfortable investing? They also may be convinced that even at the time they're not succeeding, they're not hitting their goals or objectives, that by backing it, it gives them more time. It makes it easier for people to invest, and it enables them to, some people have God complexes. They can convince themselves they can make anything work. So by backing it, what's the big deal if I'm backing $100 or $2 million? I'm fantastic. I'm great. I'm on the cover of magazines. People say that I'm a genius and the best in the world. Eventually it's going to work. So who cares if I back it today? Because there's a pile of money down the road. So you can expect his lawyers to cover that extensively to the jury. If he thought there was wrongdoing, why would he back it? I think I just told you. In this case, Yam testified on trial, again, penalty of perjury. She has no upside in lying. Not like she's exaggerating to try to keep herself out of prison. She wants to do the right thing. She testified that from 2009 to 2011, the company had losses of 11 million, 16 million, and 27 million dollars. It's interesting. We talk a lot about the stakeholders in our work. I'm going to come away from this blog for a moment. Talk a lot about the stakeholders in this work. The prosecution, their goal is to find justice, to advance their career by sending people to prison, because someday these prosecutors are going to be defense attorneys in Northern California, and they'll leverage off this conviction and justifying a high wage at a big time white collar law firm. So those are the stakeholders. What's the stakeholder of the judge, of the probation officer, of the defense attorney who's looking to throw out any and all defenses to keep their client out of prison? You also have to think a little bit about the stakeholders of the media, the way they lionized Miss Holmes as some young Steve Jobs, yet ignoring, it seems, the hundreds of $millions in raised money and losses. Perhaps had they better examined the company, including just on the surface, the incredible losses, they might have been more, they could have given more thought to putting her on Entrepreneur Magazine and Fortune and just lionizing her as the next Steve Jobs, when in reality, there's no comparison between her and Steve Jobs, no comparison between the value that he created versus what she was seeking to create. So the stakeholders in any government investigation are key. Everyone has an agenda. Media, they want more viewers, they want subscribers, they want to sell advertising. Prosecutors want convictions. Always got to be thinking about the stakeholders as we head back to this blog by way of our very impressive technology. Coming back to Ms. Yam, who testified at trial, prosecutors asked her if Theranos indeed had revenue-generating contracts with the Department of Defense or the U.S. military. She said that was a big negative. These questions support prosecutors' claims that Holmes lied to boards, to its board, partners, and investors about their finances. Through Yam's testimony, prosecutors established that Theranos provided inflated revenue projections. Potential investors received a list of revenue projections, including 140 to 990 million in 2015. Of course, her defense will say those are only projections, projecting out of the future. This is what we were expecting, but based on the contracts they didn't have, including with the Department of Defense or the military, based on what they knew internally, based on the money they were raising and losing and the expenses without a viable product, they knew or should have known those projections would have only been accurate in fantasy land. There's a great line. Do you ever see the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield? And he's exchanging this dialogue with a professor talking about how business works. And the professor says, this is the way it works. And Rodney Dangerfield says, yeah, in fantasy land. It's one thing in reality. It's another thing when you're offering projections made up in a boardroom. Great film, Back to School, by the way. I think I watched it 10 times with my dad back in the 80s. A whistleblower also testified, Eric Chang, and she really is, as we wrote in this blog of Prison Professors, a poster child for whistleblowing and speaking truth, because there are significant ramifications that come to whistleblowers. You get ostracized, demoted, fired. It's very difficult. Again, it's very easy to say, oh, I'm going to do the right thing in a college classroom, or when I was in federal prison, I'm going to do the right thing and be ethical, and you learn from mistakes. When you come home, you're faced with real dilemmas and real pressures in the real world. So it's hard not to applaud Ms. Chang for coming out as a poster child, because while some come into lots of money due to the Sarbanes-Oxley and whistleblowing rewards, many get fired, demoted, ostracized, and it's a life of pain. And in some cases, they're unhireable because word spreads in the community. So you should reward whistleblowers. It's very difficult, and they deserve credit and pay if they help ferret out fraud. In 2014, Chang, the whistleblower, said on the stand that she discovered that Theranos' technology did not work as promised, and she resigned after concerned that their promises were putting patient safety at risk. That moved things to a whole new level, right? A YouTube subscriber commented that it's one thing to defraud, Walgreens and Safeway billion-dollar companies, and that's wrong every day of the week. But it's really becomes devastating when potential patient safety is put at risk. I mean, that is a big deal. You look at opioid convictions in this country and doctors getting 5, 10, 15, 20 years in prison because they overprescribed a medication or offered a kickback to a salesman. And in so doing, someone dies of a fentanyl spray or an overdose. It's one thing to defraud a billion-dollar company, which may be a rounding error and still wrong. It's another thing to actually put patients' safety at risk to the detriment of them, but to advance your own career. So again, good on her, not just for addressing it, but by leaving, because so many people will convince themselves, well, this is my paycheck. I'm not responsible. I'm not raising the money. I'm simply doing my job. She is a hero, this Ms. Chang, and she deserves the credit that will come her way. In fact, she should write a book. Maybe we can interview her on this channel. Theranos told investors, she said, that its proprietary machine could run hundreds of tests with just a finger prick worth of blood. That was untrue. Chang explained that Theranos could never handle more than 12 types of blood tests on its proprietary Edison machine, and instead ran more tests on modified third-party machines. I mean, that's fraud, if true. That's deceit, if true. And when you get away with it for long enough, or you convince yourself in time it's going to work, or you convince yourself because I'm backing this, financially, that I just need more time. It's a very cliched slippery slope, as they say. They made a bad decision for a long time. Another misleading practice, Ms. Chang said, was that Theranos promised a 2-hour turnaround for patient results, which would often be 2 to 3 days. Finally, Chang testified in no uncertain terms that the company manipulated lab results data. She said that lab employees routinely manipulated the data when running quality control in an attempt to keep the company's proprietary devices operate. I mean, this is devastating. You have a whistleblower, someone who's not indicted, someone who's not looking to cooperate to keep themselves out of prison, simply to tell the truth. This is devastating. This is devastating testimony, and something that I presume is impacting the jury. And from what I've heard, she's a very credible witness. Since she left Theranos, Chang has talked openly about how she faced retaliation from Theranos when they suspected she was talking to a journal in 2015. One night, Chang says she was working late at a job, and after leaving was working late at a job she took after leaving Theranos when she noticed that a man was sitting in the parking lot outside of her new workplace. The man gave Chang a letter from Theranos' law firm threatening a lawsuit for violating her non-disclosure agreement. At that point, she realized the company was following her. It's one thing, to get served with a letter from a server or something like that, but to leave work in the evening and have someone in a van, I mean, that is clearly, from what I've read and heard, that is intimidation. That is scary. That is stuff that'll keep you up at night, because when you're working around people, in her mind, that are fraudulent and liars and thieves who are willing to do anything to raise money, potentially put people's lives at risk, that could include putting your own life at risk. Sometimes white collar crime goes red collar crime, violence. It happens, and these are things that all whistleblowers need to be aware of. In conclusion, as we wrap up number 5 of the Elizabeth Holmes trial, the government witnesses thus far appear to be credible and are simply there to tell the truth as best they can. I have no doubt the defense is going to try to poke as many holes as they can, because they just need one juror to find her not guilty. Time will tell. Thank you very much for watching this 5th video on our Prison Professor YouTube channel and podcast in the ongoing Elizabeth Holmes trial. We will report back soon. And I am Justin, your court reporter. Thank you so much. Goodbye.